So here we go, Unit 4, Lecture 6, States of Consciousness. We're going to do a little intro to sleep. We'll get more into sleep and dreams in a lecture coming up. We'll also take a look at hypnosis, meditation, and also drug use and addiction. Again, we're going to skip a rock across the pond here. There's a lot of stuff that could be covered days, weeks. You could major in some of this stuff, which again is kind of hindrance of intro to psychology, but also what's kind of interesting about it as well. So let's take a look at your waking consciousness. Your waking consciousness is everything that you are aware of at any particular time. Sure, I've mentioned you got 2 billion bits of information coming at you any second. Your waking consciousness is your thoughts, your perceptions of everything going on. Below that is your preconsciousness, which is your memories that you can easily get to, stored knowledge that you have. The capital of Texas is Austin. That's in your waking consciousness. And then you've got your unconsciousness, which is really everything that you are. Most everything that we do, the fact that I'm moving my hand right, well, now it's a conscious belief, but before that, unconscious and its actions. So every second, again, the brain is exposed to about 2 billion bits of information. And then we have to, wakingly pay attention to a little bit of it to make short-term sort of decisions. It takes this brain, we talked about this before, about 0.3 seconds to travel from our senses to our brain, then for us to react. So most of what we do is unconscious behavior. But our waking consciousness is everything that we're actively paying attention to. If you're listening to this lecture and you are actively paying attention to it, this is in your waking consciousness. But at the same time, if you're trying to pay attention to this while listening to other music or my dog bark over here or whatever else the case may be, that sort of gets in the way of that. Our conscious behavior is much slower than our normal behavior, which again is why your coach says, don't think about it, just shoot. So again, how your mind and body act and react as you drive to school in the morning, you get to school at the end of the drive and you can't remember how you got there because it wasn't worth putting all that information away. Yet when we drive someplace where we've never been before, it's a new road, we're more actively paying attention to it because that's a new sort of journey that we're going on. So when it comes to states of consciousness, daydreams and fantasies are very frequent. They're very healthy, imaginary friends, all that. 1960 psychologists used to warn teachers and parents of the dangers of it. A wandering mind is an unhealthy mind. But what we've discovered is a wandering mind is fantastic. It's wonderful. It allows discovery. It allows you to come up with new solutions, think outside the box, all these things that we need to do. Young people tend to have more daydreams and fantasies than older people because young people have fewer memories than older people. So as a result, it's always thinking about what could happen and potential and all that. Whereas the older you get, you more reflect on what has happened. They tend to follow experience as well as take in what we're exposed to at that particular time. People who fantasize that celebrities that you follow on Twitter are actually your friend or that you have some relationship with them, which you do. If I listen to a podcast on a weekly basis of somebody, I do have a relationship with that person, but I also have to know it's a one-way relationship. I'm just receiving, not really giving anything to them. And that's where some people get into the idea of what is called a fantasy-prone personality, where you have trouble distinguishing the fantasy from the reality of the situation because you take a look at that fantasy relationship and it seems so vivid to you. And suddenly you have the guy showing up on Taylor Swift's doorstep going, no, she's really my girlfriend. That music is speaking to me. These people also tend to fall into the realm of schizophrenia, which we'll talk about down the road when we get to disorders, not being able to tell the difference between reality and fantasy. Most of us fantasize in a way of thinking of potential situations. How should I ask this person out on a date? If I get a job interview and they ask me these questions, how should I respond to them? So it's very healthy. Even unrealistic fantasies can be healthy. One of my favorite fantasies that I have is winning the lottery. Of course, I know it's not going to come true because I've never played the lottery. But at the same time, it doesn't stop me from imagining what I would do with that money. And I would think that, I just would list a bunch of friends. How much do you owe on your house? Let me pay off your house for you. And I get that happy dopamine rush of paying off my friend's house, even though I'm not paying off my friend's house, but I get that pleasure from it. Even though it doesn't make anyone better, I can still get a little bit of a joy out of the potential of that and whatnot, even though I know it's not going to come true because I've never played the lottery, nor would I win had I played. So when it comes to why we sleep, we do it for a lot of reasons. Number one reason, it protects us, because as long as I'm sleeping in bed, I'm not driving in my car at 90 miles per hour. I'm less likely to get into an accident, less likely to get in an argument at a bar, less likely to be crossing the street, you know. So it does protect us because it stops us from being put into risky behavior. Also, sleep helps us recuperate. It restores the immune system, allows our brain to shut down and just sort of do what it needs to do, day-to-day activities, repair the tissue, prune away unnecessary neural connections that we've made during the day. Studies have shown that if you sleep one more hour a day instead of spending that 1 hour watching TV, you can lose 14 pounds a year. It's £1 a month right there. Lack of sleep has the reverse effects. When you do not sleep, it decreases your metabolism because you got to store that fat. You never know when you need it. Greater production of fat cells, reduces strength in muscles and their development. Whereas if we sleep, our muscles actually develop more. Not to mention our muscle memory develops more, because if I just played tennis right before I went to bed, I'm going to repeat that in my mind. One night of insufficient sleep drops a person's threshold of pain by 15%. It makes it harder to recover. Teens who sleep 4 or fewer hours a night for an extended time have a cognitive decline equivalent to 8 years of aging. Sleep is just good. It does your body good. It helps your body repair itself. Incredibly, incredibly important. Sleep helps us restore and rebuild our fading memories of that day's experience. And again, things that I did during the day, those neural connections that are important are going to be strengthened throughout the day. It's the reason why all-nighters are not a good strategy, because you've never had a chance to process the information. A lot of this processing happens while we are asleep. During adolescence, nearly 1/3 of the brain's billions of neural connections die and reorganize in a radical way. And this reorganization requires sleep. It strengthens muscle memory, the idea of playing tennis that I mentioned before. Babies sleep more because babies are constantly learning. They're constantly making these connections, which is why they're knocked out all day, not to mention they're building muscle and tissues and all these other things. It's the reason why you as a teenager need more sleep than I do, because you are producing bone, you're producing blood, you're producing skin at greater rates than I am. Your frontal lobe is being produced. Mine's already there. You know, you need more sleep the younger you are, but you think the younger I am, I've got more energy, I don't need sleep, I can catch up on sleep. No, you can't. Sleep also feeds creative thinking. It allows us to think without restrictions. And we'll talk about this down the road when we talk about dreaming. It allows you to think outside the box. There's no rules. There's no limitations when I dream. There's no penalties or punishments for being wrong. So I can take risks and chances when I sleep that I can't do when I'm awake. Also, it supports growth. The slow wave sleep, which we'll talk about a little bit down the road. Stages 3 and 4, the pituitary gland will release natural growth hormones, which are incredibly important while we're sleeping. A 2012 study showed that 50% of teens owned a smartphone. I'm sorry, this is 2016 study. 2012 was only 50% of teens own a smartphone. And then the percentage of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders who got less than 7 hours of sleep most nights has taken off, because you've got this little thing right next to you all the time and little alerts going off and everything else that can really get a lot of your attention. You're getting less sleep. And as a result, when you look at the percentage of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders who agree or mostly agree with the statement, I often feel left out of things, a lot of times they feel lonely, has greatly taken off. It was going down in the 90s with the internet and everything else. But now that we've got the smartphone and we see what everybody else is doing and we feel left out, it's gone up tremendously to where it's about 1/3 of the population of teenagers feel left out. And we'll talk about this more down the road when we talk about this FOMO, this fear of missing out. Sleep deprived brains, you can take a look at there and read that if you so desire. Again, some positive things about sleep, as well as some bad effects of not getting sleep as well. What happens to our brain, you can take a look at as well. Now, When it comes to sleep disorders, there's a lot of different ones. One type is what is called night terrors. This tends to happen to young children as they're kind of learning to sleep at this particular time. Your heart rate can double, your breathing rates become much, much faster. It's not a dream because it occurs in stage 3, not the REM stage where dreams occur. Tends to strike younger children because, again, you're learning how to sleep. This is why younger children are also more susceptible to talking in their sleep, more susceptible to sleepwalking. 20% of all children will have some sort of sleepwalking episodes, and it's no big deal. Is there something you need to talk about that I need to pause this?
Please.
Okay, I'm going to pause this, and I'll be right back. Sorry for that interruption. Little daughter had to have a conversation about whatever. I forget what it was already. Last thing I talked about was sleepwalking and talking, because again, the younger you are, sleeping's new. You got to figure out how does my pons turn off the body so my body doesn't react? How do I stop talking and know the difference between a dream and consciousness and all that? So as a result, as you get older, a lot of those we tend to work our way out of. Now, another big problem for a lot of folks is insomnia, which is recurring problems in falling or staying asleep. Now, as a teenager, you may feel, oh, I have insomnia. Well, your insomnia tends to be due to an inconsistent sleep pattern, which we'll talk about in a lecture in a couple of days about your circadian rhythm, and you got to stay consistent with it and everything else. Insomnia usually as a disorder is usually for people who are older. Sleep becomes more interrupted. You can't sleep through the night. A lot of times when people try to use sleeping pills or even alcohol, this aggravates the problems because you have increased tolerance level. Oh, let me take a pill. It helps me get to sleep, but then your body adapts to it and you begin to have a toleration issue with that. Narcolepsy, on the other hand of that, is uncontrollable sleep attacks. And sometimes you go directly into stages of what is called REM sleep as well. Usually lasts for less than 5 minutes, usually happens at inopportune times. And again, if you're someone who's driving a truck, narcolepsy is something you need fixed because that can really become a big, big issue. Sleep apnea, another big, big thing. If those of you guys whose father takes a nap in the living room, and you hear this huge snoring, and then usually when he's in the nap, you'll hear that. That's sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is when you've actually lost oxygen. You're losing oxygen and going to sleep. There's an obstruction that's going on down here, which is stopping air from getting in. Sometimes this can be due to high blood pressure. This can be due to a larger person, more weight, the way that we sleep and everything else. There are treatments for sleep apnea, which includes, you can get the mask, the whole Darth Vader thing going on. You could change sleeping positions. Losing weight is a great way to do it, because I, as someone who used to suffer from sleep apnea, what I've done is I've changed sleeping positions and also lessened my weight and lowered my blood pressure. And as a result of all those, my sleep apnea has pretty much gone away. As far as I know, what do I know? I'm asleep. But my wife tells me it's gone. Maybe she wants me dead. Who knows? Now, let's get away from that. Sleep to hypnosis. The idea of hypnosis, this is another state of consciousness. Hypnosis is not the, follow the pen going back and forth. You're getting very sleepy, now cluck like a chicken. That's not what it is. Hypnosis is where your mind just basically slips into a trance-like state. It's an altered state of consciousness. You're not awake, you're not asleep, but you know what's going on. And a lot of times what hypnosis does, it leaves you open to suggestibility, dissociation. It allows you to put your guard down, do all these things. You not lose your control of your behavior. You can't do things that you wouldn't naturally do. It's just your inhibition of maybe not wanting to do it or say those things sort of go away. Again, suggestibility is huge during hypnosis. Some people will use hypnotism to stop smoking, where while they're under a hypnotic state, the person performing the hypnotism will say the taste of cigarettes will become very bitter to you when you wake up. It'll be a very bad acidy taste when it hits your lips, and you're just going to find them disgusting. And when a cigarette touches your mouth, you'll think of ashtrays and the disgust and the dirt and all that goes with it. And as a result, some people are able to quit smoking. But again, it's a small proportion of the population. Only about 20% of the population is highly hypnotizable. You have to want to be hypnotized in order to be hypnotized. So again, it just heightens suggestibility, doesn't necessarily work for everyone. Some more stuff there on hypnotism if you want to take a look at it. Now, meditation is something that you can do to sort of calm your mind. Now, this isn't going to sleep. This is sort of putting yourself in an altered state of peace, where your mind's not thinking of things. The goal is to relax your body, which you get the parasympathetic nervous system going. So a lot of times, it doesn't mean you have to be in a room and light a bunch of candles and going, we're not talking about that. Though that could work for you. Sometimes people will get a mantra that they'll repeat to themselves, like, I am one with me, and with me I am one. I am one with me. And then you focus on that mantra and that stain. And this allows your brain to just sort of relax and be in this sort of altered state of comfortability, because usually when we're awake, we're watching TV or on our phone or trying to multitask or do all these other things. This just allows your brain to sort of take a time out while still awake. And some people, when it comes to meditation, they're all in. They love it. They think it's fantastic. It's a godsend and everything else. Others, when it comes to meditation, I've tried to meditate. It's hard for me to just do that. But at the same time, I'm also someone that I'll take a time out when I'm driving. A lot of times I'll drive without the radio on, so I can just sort of let my thoughts work their way out and get caught in that silence sometimes. So again, meditation can work for a lot of people, but again, not necessarily for everyone, but it is an altered state of consciousness there. So some benefits there to meditation if you'd like to take a look at that. So let's talk about drug dependency and addiction as well. Now, there's different types of drugs and there's different types of things. And I'm not going to sit here and say that every drug is bad and whatnot. What I'm doing right here, there's a caffeinated soda in here. Caffeine is a drug. It is a stimulant. So for me to sit here and say, I've never done a drug, you should never do drugs, I can't say that. Drugs are just anything that will basically alter us in some way. A couple of different types. There's a psychoactive drug, which is a chemical substance that will alter our perception of moods that we're talking about here. And there's a couple of types of dependencies here. There's a physiological dependency. A physiological dependency means that you take a drug, and as a result, that drug alters your body's reaction. It alters your neurotransmission level. It alters your perception. It alters your behavior because it lowers inhibition or whatever. Now, when it comes to our physiological dependence of a drug, what happens is we build up a tolerance. If you're someone who, let's say, and I'm going to get a little radical here with the drug that I'm going to use, but let's say someone wants a stimulation from a drug, caffeine, or let's use cocaine to really hype it up, which I think I talked about this before. But when you, somebody that wants that high from the cocaine, let's say your normal neurotransmitter level of dopamine is about right here, that ability to have that extra energy or whatnot, normally right here. So I don't want to be right here. I want to be high. I want to be up here. So I've got my normal production of dopamine, but then let me take the cocaine so I can get this high. Well, the problem is you get that high and your body goes, whoa, that's too much. Let's produce less then. So instead of producing this much dopamine, I'm not going to produce this much dopamine. So now I need the drug just to feel normal. I got to take the drug just to feel normal. And this again is people who get addicted to caffeine. You know, the caffeine no longer gives them a boost in the morning. They just gotta just to get started in the morning because they become so used to drinking their Starbucks or whatever every morning. So your body produces less. So I gotta drink a little bit more to take a little more cocaine to just feel normal. And if I want to get high, I got to do more. Well, then my body's going to produce less. And then we get this big gap, and that gap is the withdrawal that we feel when we discontinue the use. Addiction is usually the result of someone using substances who try to deal with a stressful situation or emotions. It's not just the party guy who's lost control. Addiction is usually a coping mechanism. Let me forget this situation. Let me not deal with this particular thing, whatever. That's where addiction really sort of comes in because you need it. It's not the high. It's a coping mechanism that a lot of people use. So a physiological dependence is when you are physically in need of it, but that's not really the most dangerous one. The dangerous dependence is what is called a psychological dependence. And a psychological dependence is you need to use the drug to run your day-to-day life because you're escaping from an emotion. I don't want to deal, I gotta go see my parents and I don't want to deal with them. So this will take the edge off or whatever. I got to deal with my job, or I'm bored with my life, or I don't like the reality of my life. So this will give me a little more of a pep, whatever. These are psychological dependencies. This is if I'm going to hang out with these friends, they're doing this, so I need to do this, all these other things. I can't deal with the anxiety. I can't deal with the situation. So let me take this to alleviate that. That's a psychological dependence. And many people will argue, myself included, that the psychological dependence is actually far more hindering than any physical dependence. You need it just to cope. You need it to medicate. And then the problem is you do the drug, you get the high, you get the release, you get the checking out, whatever. And as soon as you sober up, the problem's still there. If you're going, well, my life is just boring, so you take the whatever and you feel that, ooh, I'm high or I'm drunk or whatnot, you get out of it, your life is still what it was and possibly worse because of things that you did during that high or drunken state or whatever. So again, it's hard to deal with the problem of addiction without dealing with the underlying problem, but it's also difficult to deal with the underlying problem when you're currently an addict. You got what you have to do when someone sobers up. First off, you got to get away from the addiction. You got to sober up, and then you got to deal with whatever problem got you into that addiction. And usually addiction is because of a need to escape, to deal, to cope, whatever the fact may be. This is also why men are more likely to fall into the addictive things, because men are less likely to talk about their problems, deal with their emotions, whatever. Let me just get high. Let me get drunk. Let me beat someone up so I don't have to deal with my issues. But then again, you sober up and the problem's there again. And again, it's probably worse. So some other things about the difference between an addiction and a habit. And by the way, I'm not saying everybody who's ever had a glass of wine or drank a beer is an alcoholic. I'm not saying anyone who's ever, puffed on a cigarette or a vape or a joint or whatever is an addict. I'm not saying that, but the potential is there. I mean, a lot of people can handle a couple of drinks and a whatever and move on with their lives. It's not the death sentence that it's sometimes made out to be. But some people just have more addictive personalities. Some people, well, this coping helps. Let me do a little bit more, and it becomes this self-medicating that we're our own worst prescribers of these things. So some other things there on tolerance and addiction. Now, again, the myth about drug use. More people are using drugs than ever before, so it must be harmless. There's a big myth. It's actually fewer people are using them. We just think more people are using them because we hear more stories of people using them. Addictive drugs quickly corrupt in their gateway drugs and guaranteed use of harder drugs. Again, this is wrong. Of all people who try drugs, only 10% are going to develop an addiction. Okay. So again, if you have a friend and he drank 3 beers and you're like, oh my God, he's going to be give it some time, give it some time, let it work its way through and everything else. I'm someone who drank in college in my early 20s. I don't anymore because it's expensive. It removes my filter. So I just say whatever on my mind, and I need a filter. When I'm out with people, I need the part of my brain to stop what I would normally say. I need that to relieve that. Not a good thing. So yeah, I don't drink. I just don't drink. I don't do drugs, outside of a little bit of caffeine here. Don't. Um, but again, I have friends who do, and I'm not judgmental of that. Uh, Addiction can only be overcome with therapy treatments. Therapy can help, therapy can be fantastic, but a lot of people can, in fact, quit on their own. But again, the first thing is it's a problem. You got to realize that it's a problem, and then you sort of go from there. Now, again, let's talk about different types of drugs. Depressants. Drugs that reduce neural activity, slows down bodily functions. First depressant is alcohol. And I know this seems weird because a lot of people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. How can alcohol be a depressant? Because when I see people drink, they start acting crazy. They get aggressive. They get into fights. How is it a depressant? Because it depresses our inhibition. It depresses the frontal lobe, which teenagers already really don't have working too well. But it just depresses what you normally want it to say, what you normally want it to do, what you normally want it, that little inner voice of yours is passed out. And you basically say what's ever on your mind, just do what's ever, not think of the risk. And it depresses our frontal lobe. Okay. Also impacts processing and recall of memories, reduces our self-awareness, slows it down our reaction time, which again is why it's incredibly dangerous to drink and drive, because two things are happening at the same time. You've depressed your frontal lobe's idea of what's risky behavior. So someone who's drunk is more likely to speed because they're like, well, what the hell? Why follow the speed limit? And it depresses that. And at the same time, it slows down your reaction time. So you're driving faster and more aggressive, and your ability to react to what's ever going on has also slowed down. It's a very, very dangerous thing going on. Only increases aggression in those that are already prone to aggression. Though, if you're a peaceful person, it's not going to make you get in a fight. As a matter of fact, it'll make you more hesitant to want to get into a fight or anything else. For some people, it can increase affection, which is the Vegas quickie wedding. Oh, I'm so in love with you, or whatever. That can come forward with alcohol as well. Other depressants, barbiturates, tranquilizers, which mimic the effects of alcohol because they also depress the sympathetic nervous system. A lot of sleeping pills are barbiturates, opiates, morphine, heroin, again, depressing neural activities, blissful replace of pleasure to replace pain and anxiety. Very, very addictive situation. Now, again, when it comes to alcohol, not good. Especially when you're young, and it's just really not good. 1990 study showed that during college sexual assaults, 80% of the male assailants, 70% of the female victims, alcohol was involved. 90,000 college students were surveyed in 97, found that alcohol and other drugs were involved in 79% of all unwanted sexual activities, because again, it depresses your idea of, oh, this is okay. It's probably not. College students drink more alcohol than those who don't attend college. Because you're in college and you go, well, I'm in college, I'm supposed to be doing this, right? And freshmen drink at much higher levels than seniors, because seniors, they're over it, they're moving on. 9 in 10 students report being victims of alcohol abuse from others, insults, bullying, sexual harassment, roommate problems, whatever. And again, most people who drink casually drink. 10% of U.S. drinkers consume 50% of the alcohol. So that's where the problem is, and because again, they built an incredible tolerance for it, and alcohol kills more people each year than all other drugs combined. Yet it sponsors NASCAR races. So again, it's a kind of a mixed message that we have there with that sort of drug use. Other things there with alcohol as well. Now, when it comes to stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, right here. That's a stimulant. These excite neural activity, speeds up body functions as well. Used to boost the mood, to stay awake, to lose weight. You have to boost mood down there twice. Boosts in experience, but again, your body can only keep up with that for so long before eventually, as we talked about with the GAS, you're going to crash. Caffeine is the most common stimulant used. Nicotine, second most common. Amphetamines increase neural activities. A lot of times, diet pills are amphetamines. Cocaine, very addictive stimulant, very few recreational users. Again, the nicotine, vaping, vaping is incredibly addictive. That's why they want you to do it. They want you to get involved with it. Cigarette sales have gone down. When it comes to schools, there's fewer and fewer kids that are using cigarettes, but there's more and more people who are vaping. And e-cigarette sales are taking off. And again, alcohol is not interested in your well-being. E-cigarette sales aren't interested in your well-being. None of this. They just want you to get to do the next thing. And especially when you're young and your lungs are still developing and your brain's still developing, your neurotransmitter levels are still developing. Alcohol drug use at your age, far, 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 far more repercussions than someone who's older. Not to mention, you already don't have a frontal lobe that knows a lot of the problems that teens have with drinking, drug use, whatever, is you jump into the deep end, not hanging out in the kiddie pool. And the best thing is to just avoid it altogether. So again, there's more on caffeine. So again, when it comes to cigarettes versus e-cigarettes, many proponents of e-cigarettes will point out, well, they're less dangerous. It's less dangerous. There's no tar in your lungs or whatever. That's true. But we're starting to see people with e-cigarettes that are having collapsed lungs. We're starting to see addiction happen at a very young age. And again, you have a more addictive personality the younger you are. You have more of a need for stimulation and less of an ability to sort of handle saying that's enough of that. To say that e-cigarettes are safer than real cigarettes is like saying wrestling a lion is safer than wrestling a shark. They're both dangerous. You'd rather not wrestle either of them, to be honest. Last type of drugs we need to talk about here, hallucinogens, which is psychedelic mind manifesting drugs, distort perceptions, evoke sensory images, where sensory input really isn't there. LSD, which is a synthetic drug that is produced, PCP, a potent painkiller, unpredictable as well. They mimic serotonin, and it can really have sort of devastating effects because it's a chemical. Marijuana, major active ingredients in marijuana is THC. Marijuana is very difficult to classify here because it is a hallucinogen, but it's also a depressant like alcohol. It also sort of makes you more tolerant. It makes you more likely to say what's on your mind and all these other things. It does have the potential to be both psychologically addictive as well as physiologically addictive, because again, most people will go, well, there's no tests that show that marijuana has a physical addictive. Actually, tests are showing that there is a little bit there, but there's not a lot. But psychologically, the need to use it to escape and everything else can be very, very tempting, especially the younger you are. Some more things there on addiction. And that will wrap up this unit on that. And then probably also, that's every sort of project safety for the entire year was just covered right there. All right. Next time we're going to talk about Unit 4, Lecture 7 will be next.